Today, the Bassmasters are in Arkansas at the place where Rick Clunn set the all-time Bassmasters Classic winning record of 75 pounds, 9 ounces back in 1984. The Arkansas River at Pine Bluff. But no records will tumble this time, as these Bassmasters face some challenging fall fishing conditions.
That's because of what's been going on here on the Arkansas River earlier this year. Current flow, weather changes, and fishing pressure are all colliding, just as the Bassmaster Invitational Tournament Trail pulls into town.
Fishing on the Arkansas River during the Invitational, I think is going to be pretty rough because the river is still high. There's a lot of current out there, probably too much current really for the actual jetty fishing or pilings fishing along the river. Now, you know, river fishing, especially the Arkansas River, the fish are always concentrated just in certain areas, and you've got to look and look and look and seek these areas out, and you'll find little wads of fish back in these backwater areas, and they're huge areas, so you have to really comb a lot of water. But I expect that spinnerbaits and flipping jigs and flipping crawworms and things like that are going to take most of the fish.
Former Angler of the Year Gary Klein thinks a heavy tournament load this year has also taken a toll.
We're kind of like the last big tournament being held here at Pine Bluff. And so the river has had a lot of attention in the last month. And there's really no secrets anymore. They read Bassmasters, they know the sloughs and the bayous, and so everybody's got to go check them out. And when they go and check them out, they usually catch 1 or 2 fish, and then they go somewhere else. And if everybody catches 1 or 2 fish out of an area, then after a while the fish are just scattered. They're not grouped up. The fishermen won't allow that to take place.
Scott Suggs is a hot local angler who knows the river well. He turns to the backwater areas when conditions get tough, but weather and wood are the keys to fishing the flats.
Well, when the backwater conditions are the best, it's usually when you have just nearly zero flow. That and a high sunny day. The main key in backwater is wood, logs, laying logs, things like that. For it to drive them to the logs, you have to have a lot of sunshine. Usually from 11 o'clock on is the best time to hit backwater.
So what are you supposed to do? The tournament dates are set and you have to perform. Well, that's why the Bass Angler Sportsman Society is here, to show you new and better ways to catch bass, even under the most tough conditions, and that's what you're going to see today. You'll see how one young pro observes a changing pattern to find and catch bass. You'll also learn a new twist.
Arkansas River at Pine Bluff. Over 120 miles of fishable water, stretching from Little Rock to the north, past the Pendleton Bridge where the Arkansas dumps into the Mississippi. Anglers fishing any navigation system like the Arkansas must add another factor to their tournament game plan: locks. Barge traffic always takes priority over bass boats, and traveling beyond the safe haven of Pine Bluff can mean getting stuck outside a lock, being late for the tournament weigh-in. That's what happened to Texas pro Tommy Martin, who elected to run 60 miles downriver this first day.
Tommy, I want to ask you a question. I understand you negotiated the locks this morning. You and the lock mouse had a ballet you did together. Tell us about it.
Well, we started out today. Tim Hartman and I drew out, and I told him I had a couple places to fish, and I said, boy, you know, the only bad thing about fishing here on the river, if you do have to negotiate those locks and go through them and make that long run, we only have about 4 hours to fish when we get down there. And they let us go, and it was real nice here in the harbor. But, buddy, when we hit the river, I mean, the fog was out there, and it was thicker than pea soup, and we got lost. We got turned around, didn't know which way we was going, so we missed the first lock. We finally found the lock, and the fog lifted about 9 or 9:30, whatever, and we got through there. And I told Tim, I said, well, I lied to you, Tim. We only got 3 hours to fish because we missed the first lock. And then we run 60 miles and got way down there on the other end of the lake and went to this little old patch of fish I had, and by golly, they just thicker than flies in there. We started catching. Old Tim says, man, this going to be easy, isn't it? And I said, yeah, it is. We just reel in another, and we'd reel in another, and we'd just catch them going and coming. Started back up the river, and we got up there to the lock coming out of that lower pool, and this big old barge, I guess, was on the other side, and they wanted him in there a whole lot worse than they wanted us in there. They just didn't let us in. They let the barge in, so we sat there for 30 or 40 minutes, and as a result, it made us 30 minutes late.
I think you need
Bassmaster tournament trail rules state that you give up a pound for every minute you're late. So Tommy loses his entire 9 pounds 3 ounces today. But Arkansas's Mike McClelland seizes the opportunity.
10 pounds, 12 ounces. He has taken the lead, people. There is your leader. Let's give him a nice hand.
If not for his misfortune, Tommy Martin would have been tied for 5th on the Jersey's activewear leaderboard. But as it shakes out this first day, Mike McClelland holds a 7-ounce lead over Jimmy Mize. Malcolm Rayshall, Fred Bland, and Randy Blockett aren't far behind.
And this is the area where our tournament leader, Mike McClelland, is fishing. He's found an isolated grass bed adjacent to an island in the mouth of Brody Bend. This is an oxbow lake just off the main river channel, and there's no real distinct channel in here, but he's found this isolated grass bed with a good shad population, and that's where he's catching his bass.
The outside of these islands really doesn't have any grass to speak of. There's just a few sparse patches. There's a little bit more depth back behind this first island than there is the rest of these down through here, and I think that's a key to why these fish hold. Also, it's the first real flat off the channel out here. The main river channel's only 200 or 300 yards, and I think when there's a lot of current on the river, it just gives the fish, you know, a good break out of the current. There's a real good shad population in here. And I think that's, you know, the biggest key to why the fish are here. The shad stay here due to the grass, and it gives them a home and a place to eat.
Mike originally came here thinking he would catch bass on wood cover, but his close observation of what was going on that grass bed during the practice period changed his whole game plan.
After I realized the wood pattern wasn't going to work, I was really just kind of stumbling around out there, and I was fishing some breaks, and I happened to see this grass. Like I said, it wasn't there the last few years, and it's just recently grown. I started working into the grass and started seeing fish chase shad, and it took me a little while to figure out how to catch them once I found them, but once I was able to start catching the fish, I didn't fish them real hard during practice. I spent a lot of time just watching, you know, where the shad were and how the fish were relating to the grass by where they were coming up chasing shad, and I really learned a lot just from watching, not necessarily catching the fish during practice.
Here's a tip you Bassmasters can use. As Mike said, you don't always have to be casting to learn what bass are doing. You can observe what's going on around you to learn bass behavior.
After Mike figured out where the bass were, his next step was to figure out how to catch them.
I began fishing the grass with a topwater bait and was able to get some fish to bite the topwater bait, but I was unable to catch them. I started switching baits. I first began to catch fish on a floating worm, and really figured there could be a better and easier way to catch fish, and I started throwing a spinnerbait, and the fish really aggressively ate the spinnerbait, and it enabled me to catch the fish in a way that you really are sure that you're going to be able to boat the fish when you catch them. Right now, I've probably
Then Mike had to figure out how to best present the spinnerbait.
I'm using a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait. Got a golden nickel willow leaf combination shad pattern. I'm keeping the bait right on the surface, actually throwing a wake with the bait. I think the fish are just reacting to it as they're feeding on shad. Seems real critical that you keep the bait up and moving fast. I think they're not necessarily feeding it, it's a reaction strike. They're coming up and hitting it out of anger. Skirt color seems to be a pretty strong thing that makes a difference in whether they'll bite or not. My partner yesterday never could really match the skirt color, and he didn't get near the bites I had.
Listen to these fall bass pattern tips from Mike.
In the fall, fishing really is a day-by-day adventure. One day, fish may be on one type of structure, the next day a different. The fall is the time of year that you really have to go and seek out what the fish are telling you to do. Shad are the biggest key to catching bass in the fall. If you can find shad, fish will either be feeding underneath the shad, or a lot of times you can bring a bait fast above the shad and the fish will actually come clear through the shad to feed on it. When you do find a flat that has a number of bait fish on it, you can almost be assured there's going to be a large quantity of fish there. You really have to be patient, work any type of cover on that flat. Watch the shad, because as the shad move, they'll tell you where the fish have gone.
Alabama pro Fred Bland is also catching bass today. Fred's downsized his lure presentation for thicker fish.
Well, conditions is tough, and so all I like to do is get me a little small finesse worm. B&M makes a little 5- and 6-inch needle point worm. This happens to be a green pumpkin dipped in chartreuse. I'll make my own jig heads using eagle claw hooks off of them, and just when it's tough, I just seem to get more bites doing this, and so that's all I've been doing, trying to get 5 bites a day when it's tough. And so yesterday it worked, and today it's a little shaky right now.
Bassmaster TV's Tim Miller fills in for Ray Scott at the second day weigh-in as Texas pro Jay Ellis comes to the scales.
Put him down, Jerry. Here we go. Watch it. 14 pounds, 7 ounces. Let's give him a hand, Jay. Hold up 2 of those bigger fish for us. Look at this,
That
folks.
biggest creel of the tournament puts Jay Ellis in 5th. Remember Tommy Martin? What a comeback today as he tips the scales with 12 pounds, 12 ounces. But Mike McClelland brings in another 5-pass limit of 8 pounds, 14 ounces to hold the lead on the Jersey's activewear leaderboard. Gary Klein is second. Tommy Martin, who was off the chart yesterday, charges to 16th. The final round, and Mike McClelland returns to his grass bed in Brody Bend. But the bass aren't cooperating today. Mike's forced out of the area early by heavy barge traffic on the river, tying up the lock. The Pine Bluff Harbor is his last hope for a keeper. 70 miles downriver, Jay Ellis is also struggling. One small keeper won't be enough to pull ahead today. Back in Pine Bluff, Gary Klein is catching bass, doing what he calls junk fishing. You'll find out what he means coming up next. But first, it's time for Bass Mail, where you send in questions for the pros. Brian Stone of Moreno Valley, California, asks how to become a bass fishing professional. Well, we have 2 answers, Brian. First, from Randy Blockett.
Brian, I was in the same boat you are. You know, the fact I just wanted to be a professional fisherman my whole life. The biggest advice I can give you is spend time on the water. You know, a lot of beginning fishermen are really focused in on, you know, what it takes to get sponsors to get out there, but you're going to really use all your energy doing that. So the best thing to do is just fish day and night. You know, try to get a part-time job, mowing lawns or whatever, that will allow you to put that time on the water, because that's really the only way you're going to compete in, you know, with today's caliber anglers. Is you have to get that intellectual knowledge first. Get the confidence in your own ability, then start fishing smaller stuff. You know, start, you know, fishing the buddy tournaments, move up to maybe regional level tournaments, and then, you know, tackle the bass circuit when you're ready and you have confidence in your own ability. But the best advice I can give you is just spend time in the water as much as you can.
I think the biggest key for someone that's wanting to get started is make sure they're fishing an organization that has got some publicity behind them and also is going to get you some publicity. I know when I started, I was competing against a lot of the same guys that were fishing these BASS tournaments, but the publicity in the circuit I was fishing wasn't that good, so as far as sponsorship, recognition, and things like that, it really didn't benefit a whole lot. It's a tough road to hoe. I've been, like I say, working at it for 10 years, and it's just now getting to the point where, you know, I can comfortably get away and go to events and feel real confident that I can compete with the guys.
Send your bassin questions to Bass Mail, P.O. Box 140430, Dallas, Texas 75214. We may pick yours to answer on the air. Gary Klein started this final round in 2nd place. He's trying to get a big bite fishing junk.
The term that I call junk fishing is that I'm just fishing little isolated pieces of wood. So you have a lot of dead water, what I call dead water in between. There's virtually no targets. The fish have to be up actively feeding in order to catch them. And I really had the feeling all this week that these fish were more in an ambush mode than they were in a traveling mode, and that they were really setting up in the targets to ambush the shad. So I was really keen on anything that would come out off this little break line. And what I wanted to try to do is just hit the piece of cover right on the corner of the break. And if you notice, I skipped a little bit of bait there when the crankbait came over the log. Almost all these pieces of cover have a lot of shad activity around them. And I'm looking for an angle. I'm looking for the angle that I can get a bite off of. You have to make multiple casts. Most guys are going to make a cast of that and then they're going to leave, and I'm not. I'm going to make at least 5 or 6 and make sure that I hit both sides of the log and actually feel out here in the deeper water to see if the log extends out. What's taking place on the reservoir right now or on the river system is just a typical fall, I guess, seasonal pattern, I guess you may say. The bait fish starting to really come up on top, starting to ball up, and the fish are really starting to feed on them. You know, really the key to these fish, how they're relating to this timber, there's just a little secondary channel that comes in here. And as you can see down this bank, this is really the only stretch in this area where the timber actually comes out over the break line. And there's a little, if you can see there, it goes from like 1 foot to 12 foot. It's almost a vertical break. And here I have a series of logs that are actually extended out into that 8 to 12 foot zone. And the whole key to my success has just simply been, you know, persistent. I've had to stay in this particular area and really beat the water pretty hard and try a lot of different lures because the fish I felt were kind of getting tired of seeing the same thing all the time. Most guys will pull up and they'll flip a jig in there, a worm, and every now and then catch a fish. But the fish don't like to be in real heavy cover when they're running shad. They want to be by an isolated target that they can get away from real quick. You know, basically they're just hiding. They're just trying to ambush their prey. And if it's a big bushy deal, they have to put a lot of effort to get out, to get to the minnows. And just your little isolated stuff like that, isolated log out there on that point, obvious would be a very, very key spot for me to fish. I'm going to run my little crankbait bite, and I'm going to make sure that I go down both sides of the log. Instead of making a cast over the log, I want to run it parallel and try to hit the little shade pocket where I think the fish is lying. But that's just the key to being successful, especially under competitive conditions. You have to think, and you have to think about all the variables and think about what if. Yeah, I'm catching them, and if you're catching them on a certain lure, that's great, but don't get mindset locked in on that particular lure. You've got to think about cloud cover, sun, depth, speed of retrieve, and think about all your options as a fisherman. In other words, I think really what I'm trying to say is I want to set yourself up so you can use all your knowledge. You've got to give yourself a chance in these tournaments in order to do well. And a lot of people don't. They get so keyed in on one thing at the beginning of practice, by the time the tournament's over with, they're still doing the one thing that they were successful on the first day of the tournament. And fishing changes. It changes by the hour due to fishing pressure, due to weather pressure. And so you got to continuously think in order to beat these guys, because they're good.
But Gary Klein's big bite didn't come today. And Mike McClelland's Hail Mary in the harbor turns up 3 keeper bass.
What does big bass weigh?
Oh, about 3.5, 3.
That's your insurance bass. That's going to make you a very wealthy cowboy.
Let's hope so.
Weigh him up before a dozen drop of water dries, and the weight, McClelland, 5 pounds, 8 ounces, folks. There is your winner! Hey, let's go.
Tommy Martin makes a noble last-minute charge from 16th to take 2nd, and would have walked away with this tournament if not for that big barge tying up a lock the first day. Gary Klein takes 3rd. Now it's time for the Pros Pointer, the champion's winning strategy. Brought to you by Wrangler Ruggedwear, geared for the outdoors.
The lure I'm using to catch my fish is a War Eagle spinnerbait. It's a 3/8 ounce shad pattern bait. The reason that I feel like this bait is a key to what I'm doing right now is the bait's made from piano music wire, and it has a lot more vibration than most of the standard spinner baits. It pulsates a lot more in the water, and it allows you to, the way the wire works, the bait actually kind of folds up when you're bringing it in, retrieving it fast like I am. So it allows me to retrieve the bait at a real fast pace, and it's triggering the fish to bite it. Another neat thing about the bait is it has as you can see, it's got a drop center portion in the skirt, which also allows you not to have to throw a plastic trailer. A lot of times with the plastic trailer, fish will come up behind the bait, hit the trailer, and miss the hook due to the trailer being there. With this skirt being designed the way it is, it allows the fish to come on through the bait and get all the way to the hook when they hit it.
Next week, the Bassmasters travels to TNN's backyard and the heart of country music. We'll be at Old Hickory Lake, just outside Nashville. Watch the nation's best bass pros figure out how to catch them after a steep winter drawdown. And you'll see a Bassin family come full circle as Chad Brower begins walking in his father's footsteps. It's all next week, right here on TNN Outdoors. For the Bassmasters, I'm Bob Cobb. We'll see you all next week from Nashville.
The Bassmasters has been brought to you by Lowrance, setting the course in marine electronics. Berkeley Trilene, America's #1 selling fishing line. Jersey's Activewear, the official licensed knit apparel of the Bass Angler Sportsman Society. Chevy Trucks, the most dependable, longest-lasting trucks on the road. Ranger Boats, still building legends one at a time. Evinrude Outboards, leading the way. Zebco Quantum, the top names in fishing. Daiichi, the world's sharpest hooks. Wrangler Rugged Wear, geared for the outdoors. And the Bass Angler Sportsman Society, the world's largest bass fishing organization.